Okay, so welcome, Nick, to the second episode of the Battlefield podcast. If you want to give people an introduction as to who you are and what we're going to be, well, I'll tell them what we're talking about, but if you want to give yourself a background, that would be great.
Sure. There's two of you on screen, though.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yep, you got to disable that. All right, now we're good.
So my name's Nick. I hate the term Battlefield veteran, but I've been playing since BF2, so I suppose it qualifies. BF2, a little bit towards the end of its lifespan. BC2, BF3, BF4. 1, not quite as much. 5, 2042. I skipped Hardline. I played the beta for it or the demo for it, but didn't get a whole lot of time in on it. And I'm probably what you would call a mediocre player. I'm not out here with a 4, 5, 6 KD. I'm probably averaging 1.5 on a bad day, 2 on a good day, maybe 3 on a really good game.
So we actually play the game as opposed to the 0-15ers.
No, I generally play relatively aggressive on points and stuff, so you can only last so long when you're pushing something. But a bit more context, my favorite Battlefield is probably Bad Company 2, followed by BF3. I really enjoy the Rush game mode. I think it's a bit more focused than Conquest, and so that's where I come from. I wouldn't say that I appreciate BC2's movement, though. In preparation for coming on, I went back and I played just about every Battlefield I had access to, which is everything except BF3 right now, because Venice Unleashed is dead. And
R.I.P. Venice Unleashed.
Yep, but Project Rome is actually kind of alive for BC2. So I went back and played all of them. Some of them have held up better than others.
Yep, definitely. All right, well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to discuss unintended mechanics. Now, some of you will know what we're talking about in terms of Battlefield unintended mechanics. The most famous one, undoubtedly, is obviously the Battlefield 4 Zuzu jump, followed by the other stupid things you can do in that game, such as Vuzu, Muzu, and the fairly newly discovered Ruzu, and God forbid there might actually be one more that I'm forgetting. There's also more unintended quote-unquote mechanics that we'll get into, such as the ADS stabilization jump, which was first seen in Battlefield 3, carried all the way through up until Battlefield 5, and then when the game's engine changed in 2042, that was no longer carried over as a legacy sort of engine thing. And there's more stuff where that comes from. So what do you want to dive into first? I think we should talk about sort of unintended mechanics, whether or not they add anything, and what constitutes an unintended mechanic that's too much, or is there such thing as an unintended mechanic that is actually a good thing for the game or that adds something?
So, I mean, to immediately answer that question, I think that the best example of something that is too much is reload canceling from Bad Company 2, and I think it was in BF3 as well, where you could cycle a shotgun or a sniper much faster than intended by switching to your secondary, and then switch back, and you would have or even cut down even further how much time between shots. And in Bad Company 2 especially, where the slugs were effective at any range, with as a one-shot chest killer headshot, and you would see people fire off effectively bursts of 4 or 5 slugs by reload canceling, and that just ruins the TTK. And so something that's directly impacting your time to kill or bullets to kill, I think, is probably the most egregious of these, and is something that should be patched out. The movement stuff, like you see in BF2 with the dolphin diving, bunny hopping thing, which was patched out in 1.5, or the ADS stabilization jumps, or the 2042 momentum carrying with slides and stuff like that. I think that is more of a gray area, but I still have issues with unintended mechanics being allowed to persist past a given game in general.
Okay. So I agree with the reload cycling thing. Like, it's just cheap. I totally get that. Like, you're cycling through and it does affect game TTK. Like, we can get rid of that. That's fine. I guess we'll go into the ADS stabilization jump here. So I mentioned my first recollection of it is Battlefield 3, and then it was carried over up until BF5.
I don't think it was in 1.
It was in 1,
Was it?
actually. Yep.
It
You just
was?
can't. You
Okay.
just never jump peek in 1 because you can't really. So, but yes,
I
it is in
gotcha.
the game. I really actually enjoy that sort of thing because it is sort of I suppose, an unintended feature. And what it does, for people that don't know what the ADS stabilization jump is, you can basically jump peek a corner with your secondary out, switch weapons in midair, and then the way I do it is I sort of double tap my crouch key, and you'll land without the visual animation of the landing animation. And obviously, this makes it super powerful for jump peeking, specifically people on difficult to pre-aim angles. It does increase the actions per minute while you're playing. It's not something that you can do. You can do it easily, but it isn't. It isn't so easy that everyone is going to be able to do it. But the question is whether or not the developers actually knew it was a thing in the game that you could do. And whether or not it's okay for it to be in the game. In my playtime experience, I'm not sure if you have much playtime experience with this, but after I say my piece, I'll let you build off of it. In my experience, I do enjoy the ADS stabilization jump because, to me, it's an unintended mechanic that I feel adds something more to the gameplay.
So my main complaint with it is that it's not intended game design, because if you conventionally jump peek, you do have that awful weapon sway.
Mm-hmm.
So we know it's unintended game design. And then if we look at Battlefield 1, we're given a mechanic, at launch at least, to do what this is supposed to do. The slide in its original form was a relatively useful offensive movement mechanic. And it was nerfed because of the hit reg issues, but in its original intent, it did serve that purpose. I'm in favor of building a mechanic into the game so that it is part of the game design instead of relying on an exploit. And I think this is a good example. I think that the original slide in BF1 and the slide in BF5 take the place of that jump peek and do a better job of it. It's a little more accessible a mechanic. I am not a huge fan of the higher APM necessary for the jump peek. This is probably my mediocre player status showing. I'll try it, and it just ends up poorly. I get the weapon sway, and it just falls apart. But ultimately, I think the issue is, by including these legacy bugs, we're changing how the game plays. Because as they stick around longer in the franchise, people are used to it and they begin to use it more, and it becomes more common. Especially something, I mean, BFT is probably the best example of this, where you couldn't join a server without half of it dolphin diving across it before the 1.5 patch, even after that, really. And I think when designing a new title for the franchise like BF6, you have to take into account that people came to the franchise for a reason. And if they join a server and it's full of people using exploits. That's not really what they joined the franchise for. So we need to build the purpose of those exploits, an offensive movement to peek a corner, into the game in such a way that it's something understood by the players when they join the franchise.
Yeah. So I will agree with you in the sense that if we're talking about exploits, the BF4 stuff, which is infamous, the Zuzu jump and Vuzu, all this stuff. I mean, you vault over a med pack and you teleport. You switch weapons while vaulting and you teleport. The Zuzu jump, I believe you have to jump behind a wall where a player isn't looking at you, and then you have to land within their visibility, and your player sort of squishes down and comes back up. That sort of exploit, that is stupid. Which is why, even in Battlefield 4, like competitive, which is still somehow going on within tiny communities, they GA that, right? So they ban that. Exploits like that, where it really is an exploit and you can see it's an exploit. I'm fine with that if they get rid of it. That sort of stuff is definitely not acceptable in gameplay. People use it because they can use it, and it does offer them an advantage.
Game. Yeah. A competitive player is going to use everything they can.
Of course. Things like but I do think you can't equate something like the stabilization jump to like a Zuzu or to a Vuzu jump, because in my mind, it's just simply not as egregious or as effective.
No, it's not as egregious. It's still an exploit.
No, it is. And this begs the question, and I've kind of I'm trying to debate whether or not I should even. So I have reason to believe they knew about the ADS stabilization jump, which is why it was kept throughout 4 separate Battlefield games. And they kept it. I'm not sure why they kept it.
I'm not convinced that they. Well, I'm sure they knew about it. I'm not convinced they kept it because it was intended game design. I believe they kept it because DICE is terrible at squashing bugs.
That's well, yeah, you're right about that. They are really bad at squashing bugs. But
how long has the stretchy neck glitch been in Battlefield?
Oh, I don't even know. That BF3 was the one game that made that famous. So
I saw it in BF5 this morning.
Yeah. Yep. So I guess the question is, does something being unintended inherently make it bad to have in gameplay? Because of the most famous example in all of gaming probably is Counter-Strike with bunny hopping.
Yes.
So the developers sort of embrace that. My understanding, maybe that someone in chat or in the comment section can further elaborate. But my understanding on that is bunny hopping was definitely not intended in Counter-Strike, but the developers saw a reason, I guess, to keep it in the game. They saw it as something that added maybe a skill gap or something interesting to the gameplay that not everyone can do, and it was quite difficult to execute, especially in succession. So they decided, we're not going to patch this, and we're going to make it like part of the game's, I don't want to say identity, but it is kind of part of Counter-Strike's identity at this point.
It is.
I wouldn't say it's the same thing with Battlefield's stabilization jump, though. I wouldn't say Battlefield's identity and movement, I wouldn't say the stabilization jump or anything like that is part of Battlefield's identity per se. It's more of like an extremely niche thing that only less than 1% of the player base even knows exists. So in BF4, we already briefly mentioned the Zuzu, Vuzu, Muzu. I want to get your experience if you've played against that sort of thing, or if you've seen it. I kind of want to hear your perspective of what it's like to sort of play against that.
I've seen it done. I've probably been killed by it a couple times. It's not common in public lobbies, thankfully, but it is frustrating for sure. Uh, I generally, I mean, BF4 didn't really have a matchmaking system. I don't know. It's not quite as obvious as people think. It's more obvious when you're watching someone else's POV. So when you're watching a streamer and you're seeing them do it, or something along those lines. In game, it's not quite as obvious, except you feel a little frustrated at how you died.
Yeah, especially when the third person POV is basically he threw a med kit and now he's 6 feet behind you.
Yes.
And because he vaulted over that med kit.
That, yeah, so as someone who doesn't really know how these things work, that doesn't, it feels like hacking is what it feels like.
Yes.
I'm sure that people who do it get accusations all the time. And it's not, although on some level it's as bad. Teleporting is probably breaking intended game design just as badly as changing TTK.
Yeah. And there are a couple of my friends are masters at utilizing all of these unintended things in Battlefield 4's gameplay. And if you watch their POV, it is so far from normal BF4 gameplay. It's really funny to watch because in certain situations, players would have to, take the situation way slower or reposition entirely. But you watch someone like Focus or like Careless or some of these other players that play Battlefield 4, and in certain situations, they're like, I'm just going to brute force this. And you see them throw a med kit under them, and then suddenly they teleport 6 feet behind them. And then they're air strafing everywhere, which is, of course, intended. But then then the new thing that's in BF4 is apparently they figured out a way to teleport or like slide around the ground. They found a new movement exploit, and they named it the Ruzu. So now you don't have to have a railing to vault off of. You don't have to have a med kit to vault off of. You can do it off of any surface. So they do all these other things, and then now they found another one that breaks the game further.
Oh, okay. This is where I get weird, where you're going to call me out for having a weird ass take.
Okay.
I think prone should be removed from the game.
Okay, so based, but also they can't do it because of map design.
I mean, we're making a new game. We can change the map design.
But we can't trust them to make maps. No, we really can't. We can't trust them to make maps where there's enough cover to where we can't use prone. And I've said this for years. I have an anti-prone emote on my fucking Twitch channel. I get it.
Not been here enough then.
Remove prone, but you can't because I use it so much to stay alive in these situations that it unfortunately it's an essential mechanic you actually have to have in the game.
My take is that prone encourages camping. And I mean, sure, BC2 had its fair share of campers sitting in a bush as the ghillie suit Wookiee, but still, I'm with you on map design though. I think BC2 and BF3 had the best map design, and it's gone downhill since.
Yeah, BF3, then BF4 kind of went, and then BF1.
That's coming from a Rush player. Keep that in mind.
Okay,
I really like Rush maps.
Yeah.
So, Conquest always feels like a group of Zerglings running around in circles compared to what Rush does.
And I think you enjoy BF3 Rush so much because, and we can segue into this a little bit for, I suppose, one of the last segments. Rush in Battlefield 3 was good because
when it wasn't 64 players.
When it wasn't or was?
When it wasn't.
Okay.
It was a hot match when it was 64 players. 48 it was fine.
Very good. But also BF3 map design, a lot of the maps were made with Rush in mind, were they not?
Yes. Dam of Van Peak, Metro, yes. And people love those maps. Let's make more Rush maps.
And that's the big thing they need to focus on in the next game. Rush has been bad ever since BF4. So like BF4 onwards, in my opinion, Rush has been a mess.
Oh my god. trying
because
to play Russian BF1. It was a hot mess.
so fucking stupid sometimes. But they need to actually design these maps with a certain game mode in mind again, because it's just been so obvious. You play, like you mentioned, BF1 Rush in certain maps. The most egregious ones by far are BF5 and 2042 Rush. Absolute brain rot, some of these maps. I mean, you can just tell they gave some guy the job and said, we need a Rush layout. We need it by tomorrow. And they said, oh, put an MCOM here, we'll put it there, and blah, blah, blah. We won't even consider the amount of tickets. That's fine, whatever. We'll just throw this here. We won't consider the out-of-bounds lines either. Yeah, like this piece of cover that's probably essential for Defender gameplay, yeah, that's out of bounds. You can just tell there's no thought put into this stuff. Nowhere near the amount that there should be. And we need to have a return to maps such as Grand Bazaar, which is your background. And I would have no problem if they had a small amount of maps in the next game where they straight up one-to-one copy legacy beloved maps from the franchise. Sort of like Call of Duty does, but less annoying with Nuketown 87 times. Like, if they want to put Grand Bazaar in the game, if they want to put Sane Crossing in the game, I'm fine with that.
I'll be honest. The only reason why I bought 2042 was for Portal, on the expectation that they might add more. They might add more maps, and it was like, okay, well, they brought back Arica Harbor and Valparaiso from BC2, and I was like, okay, we got Rush maps. We're gonna play this. And I was like, oh, they're gonna add more. Wouldn't it be cool if they kept adding back legacy maps? Yeah.
As someone in my chat just said right now, Portal was their greatest lie. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
He thought. You fucking thought, okay?
It seemed so sensible. People love the old maps. Why not just keep making them? Bring them back. No, if someone, I mean, I've been saying for a while I want a BC2 remake. I don't think I'm going to get it, but if they just, brought back a handful of maps from BF3, BC2, you could probably get away with bringing back some of the better maps from BF4. And you got legacy stuff from BF2 that still plays really well in BF4. You could bring that too. I don't know where map design went, but it feels like it's been shit since 2015. BF1 has great ambiance. I don't love the maps.
Really? I liked some of BF1's maps. I did. I thought Priest was good. I thought Nivelle Knights was good. Achibaba. There was that one conquest map.
Actually, play Nivelle Knights is a nightmare, though.
Well, I'm sorry, what?
Getting people to actually play Nivelle Knights is a nightmare, though. You get to the map vote screen, and everybody says, no, we're going to do something else. No, we're gonna go back to that one Sniper Hell sand map that I forget the name of.
Sinai Desert, yeah.
Yes. BF1 had a couple good maps, but I don't think I would say any of them were great. And I think if you go back to BF3 and BC2, you have like 6 great maps, another 6 good maps, and then the rest are mediocre, and maybe a handful of bad ones between the two games. And you can't say that about everything since. BF1 nailed atmosphere, and it did that great. And I think they were limited in the map design by the atmosphere, because you're going back to World War I inspired maps, which means you're in fields and trenches, so you're extreme CQB or extreme long range. That's often not fun, especially when you have to switch between the two as a role only suited for one of them.
It's actually interesting. So you think BF1's map design was limited via atmosphere?
Yeah, because, I mean...
Which is interesting because the atmosphere in the, whenever people talk about BF1, the atmosphere, the immersion. Yeah. It's one of the main things people talk about.
If they applied that effort to a modern shooter, it would work quite well.
I don't know if I've ever heard the opinion that the atmosphere limited the map design. That's actually pretty interesting.
I mean, the ultimate problem is they had to model maps off of World War I. The best maps they had were those that included buildings, that included a shit ton of rubble for you to hide in. If you go look at some of the Russian expansion ones, where you've got just trenches in a field,
Galicia.
Yes, you're either assault with an SMG in the trench, or you're a sniper hiding behind a rock shooting people that get out of the trench. And if either of those leave those roles, it's a fucking shit show. And if you're a medic, you can kind of make it work in either scenario, but the ranges are still a little too long for you to really really use that self-stutter.
I can definitely see your point. Whether or not the atmosphere was a driving factor as to why they chose to design maps like Galicia the way they did, I'm not so sure. Because in my opinion, they could have easily went about designing Galicia or maps like that in a different way just to make them more playable. But maybe the atmosphere did influence them that much. And I want to I want to ask you this. So BF1's atmosphere is great.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think, God, how do I even say this? It's like people focus on the wrong things all the time when it comes to Battlefield, especially with Battlefield 1.
Yes.
And I think BF1 brought in a ton of players that weren't necessarily trying to play an FPS game. They were trying to play like a World War II, a World War I history simulator
yes.
thing.
I mean, I think that there's a lot of fun to be had when you go play hardcore with no HUD, and it's definitely a vibe. It's not, I mean, it's not a competitive shooter at that point, though.
You mentioned hardcore. Do you play hardcore?
I have 8,000 hours in Bad Company 2 with slugs. I love hardcore.
All right, now we're gonna get into this. All right, now we're gonna get into this. So
it's not the only thing I play. I definitely enjoy the conventional game, and I think the conventional game is balanced better because hardcore is a shit show where everyone either has a bolt action or a shotgun with slugs.
Okay, so you're not okay.
I'm not insane. I recognize that the balance is awful.
Yes,
but it can be a hell of a lot of fun.
So I made a couple of videos on this. I really truly believe they shouldn't even allow people to create hardcore servers. Because I think I'm tired of Battlefield not taking a hardline approach as to what the game actually is. There's too much confusion. People say, I love playing hardcore, and I love playing this, and I love playing that. And Battlefield goes, woo, for everybody, woo, yeah. And then there's so much debate. There's so much division. It's just, I view hardcore as just quite literally useless. Like, I could play hardcore, fine, whatever. The only time I'm going to die is if I'm getting shot by a bolt action. Other than that, I'm going 80-1, right? Like 50-1. I can just camp. You know, like you mentioned, you just use one-shot weapons and all that. I really don't think hardcore, I don't like it. I think DICE should take a hardline stance and be like, this is what we're making our game. There it is. Like, I'm tired of seeing it.
I can understand that. I wouldn't cry if hardcore was removed. I do mostly play conventional. And I do want to say specifically to Sarny, I don't go one-shotting everyone in hardcore. I go one-shotting everyone in the normal ass mode. In normal rush. You bring back 3D spotting and I will shoot you from across the map with a slug. It'll be fine.
Dude, you mentioned slugs a lot. I bet you were on BF3 No Shark Canals TDM with the 870 MCS slug a lot.
No, that was the AEK.
Okay, yeah, okay.
What else would you use? No, slugs are fun. The thing with BC2 is that they were an exploit, really. And I was using the exploit.
Well, they didn't have drop, did they?
They didn't have drop, and you reload cycle, and they one-shot, headshot across the map. They were broken, and so I used them. Like, you could shoot helicopter pilots out of the helicopter with them. It was a lot of fun. It was a little broken, and I'll admit that. And, you know, you can take it out, and I won't cry. I'll go use the assault rifles. It'll be fine.
So I want to pick your brain about the hardcore mark. So okay, why do you play hardcore?
I play hardcore because sometimes it's the server I click on. Sometimes it's the one that's populated on the map I want to play. And
Okay.
I will enjoy the different experience. What
You're
I
basically
said
not.
earlier
You're
was a
not
little
picky.
tongue-in-cheek. No. What I said was a little earlier was tongue-in-cheek. I can enjoy the experience, but I'm not a hardcore main.
Okay.
I don't think that removing it would be a great loss. I also don't think that leaving it in is a cardinal sin. I
Okay.
can respect that some people want to play hardcore, and I don't see anything wrong with leaving it in there for them. Now, I think that when those people go to ask for certain things in the next Battlefield, they need to preface it by saying, we want a hardcore mode with these features. They can't say, we want Battlefield 6 to have this, because, and then list off a series of hardcore features. And I do think there is some merit to saying, just go play squad.
No,
It's
I really think there is some. Well, here's why. I'm gonna explain why a lot of hardcore players don't go play milsims, even though they're readily available. You can play.
It's too slow. Hardcore is a beautiful mix of fast and it's a fast TTK and a fast movement.
The
That's what
reason why a
people
lot
like.
of Battlefield players that play hardcore don't play milsims is because the milsims are actually too mechanically difficult for them to play.
Sure. I think that's certainly true with some of them.
So they want to make Battlefield, which is a game that is very accessible,
Arcade shooter.
all that sort of stuff. They
It's
want
an
to
arcade
take,
shooter. We can call it that.
yeah, exactly. They want to take the Battlefield DNA, which is accessible to them, and they want to change it to essentially what they want. And they don't want to go and play Squad or these other milsim games because they actually can't, because it's too difficult.
I think there is a wide gap between Battlefield and the Milsim games that
Yes.
leaves space for something for those people. Because I go play squad, and it is 20 minutes of hiking across a field, and then I die, and then I hike across a field again, and it's not fun.
Yeah.
And I would love something. I would go play something like Insurgency. There we go. That's the game in the middle. Go play Insurgency if you want to play these things.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm not even gonna add that. You said it better than I could have said it, right? Go play Insurgency, hardcore players. Like, what the fuck?
Jump in occasionally. It's fun.
But okay. Oh, you said it's not a cardinal sin leaving hardcore in the game. Have you seen Portal?
Portal is a shit show for reasons other than hardcore being there.
But have you seen
Portal
what
is
they've
a
done? What they've done with hardcore? When you give these people options.
Well, I mean, you go back and look at hardcore servers in past Battlefields where they did have those options from self-hosting. You didn't see it as much in BF5 and BF1 because you really kind of couldn't, but you go back to BF3 and BF4, you have pretty crazy hardcore servers as well.
It's not 1,000% Afghanistan war sim friendly fire fast vehicle 4,000 ticket El Alamein 24/7 though. That's
you back when you could actually get those servers populated, they existed. Now, because there's not enough of a player base, you don't see them anymore. But they were there.
Remove hardcore. That's my stance. Fucking remove it.
I won't fight you on it, but okay.
I'm tired of seeing it.
I don't think we've touched class balance. You want to talk about that?
We could talk about it slightly. In terms of what? Like, in terms of class lock and weapons, or what gadgets they should have, or...
I mean, I think that I think it stems back to people not knowing what they're asking for. People say they want BF3 or BF4, and they don't realize that those were fairly open. There was ultimately I won't say ultimately, but I think if you go back and look at a video Matimio made 10 years ago talking about Bad Company 2.
Okay.
At that time, there was a quote from a DICE dev saying that they didn't understand why Bad Company 2 was so beloved.
Yeah.
And Matimio was saying it's because classes had actual roles. And that wasn't in context to 2042 or anything. That was in context to BF3 and BF4. And so I think people who are looking at BF3 and BF4 with these rose-tinted glasses don't quite understand what they're asking for. Now, if someone says they want BF1 class balance, that's different.
Yes,
they know what they're asking for.
you're 100% right. I've again made very recent multiple videos on this subject because of the BF6 class announcement where they detailed their direction, and they're going to release another one of those direction posts very soon. But I made videos on this, and the comment section, some people understood my point, which is BF4 system isn't what you want. It's not what you're asking for. You want something stricter. Other people were just, the nonsensical sort of hostile thing. We're like, oh, you don't understand Battlefield vendors. Like, fuck you. I do think Battlefield players just pick and choose really strange things. They want to feel like classes have something specific
And then
that's exclusive to them.
The moment
but at the same time,
handle on their own, they instantly want to lone wolf everything.
But at the same time, they want all these open weapon options for classes. And it's like, okay, do you want weapons to play a defining role in classes? Or do you want to like half-ass it? Be like, oh yeah, we'll give assault rifles, but I want to use my carbine and shotgun and DMR as well. It's like the Battlefield community really picks and chooses weird things when it comes to this. But like you said, they don't really know what they're asking for. What they're asking for, in my opinion, is they want strict weapon-locked classes, right? Where the gadgets and the weapons define the classes definitively. There's no question. There probably aren't any universal class options, class weapon type options. And but then they go and ask for BF4, which doesn't give them that.
So I think that a lot of it also ties into map design, because all of these class distinctions really boil down to what sort of engagement range do you have. And if the map design is favoring extremes, then you are going to want a wide variety of weapons so that you can be a jack of all trades. However, if you build a good map like BC2 and BF3, where you have a mixture of cover and you can actually move across the map without getting shot by a sniper from 500 meters away, if you know what you're doing, then you can get away with running an SMG or a PDW or any of the smaller, shorter range, shotgun, any of the shorter range stuff. You can get away with that because you can move across the map.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have something like Goldman Railway, where you've got a series of points that have a bunch of built up cover around them and then fields surrounding it, you can't move across the map without having a variety of options available to you. And so I think that class locking weapons actually is ultimately a map design decision. If they want to have unlocked weapons, I'm not going to complain if they do it right. If you build a good map where you can make your way across it without having without exposing yourself unduly with a short range weapon, then I think that you can make it work. However, on the flip side, I don't think the classes are very distinct, and I think that allowing everyone to have an assault rifle is going to lead to everyone running an assault rifle. So there's two elements there.
So do you think? I'll tell you what I think. You said class locking weapons is ultimately a map design decision. Do you think? This is what I think. I think you make sure you class lock weapons in a way that makes sense, and then it's a separate thing where you make sure the map design is actually good, right?
Sure.
Because I think it depends whether or not the maps are good. I don't necessarily think it matters whether or not, like Gulmud Railway, you mentioned the fields and the buildings and all that. I don't know. I just feel like in a lot of these, like in BF1, for instance, like in a lot of those really good maps that I like Argonne Forest, Achibaba, Greece, Novell Knights, Amiens. I feel like I can run anything because the maps are good. Whereas Galicia, as you mentioned previously, you kind of have to play certain types of things because the map is not good, right? So,
yeah.
I don't know. I view it as kind of a separate thing. Like, make sure the classes make sense, but also make sure the game can be played because the map design isn't shit.
Sure. I think maybe a better way to put it is that engagement distance is tied to class locked weapons. If you lock weapons, you're forcing people into choosing an engagement distance, and then engagement distance is directly tied to map design.
You want to say some last thing? Feel free. Then we'll
remove prone.
All right.
Remaster Bad Company 2.
Okay.
There we go. I'll live with that.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you had fun. And this will probably go up on, depending on if DICE releases about 50 other leaks or like they officially announce something. Chat, this episode will probably go up on Wednesday, tentatively. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you for coming on. And if you enjoy the channel, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and let me know who my next guest is. I've already have a list. Trust me, I read the comment section, guys, okay? So you'll see some people that you've been asking for up maybe even next week. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.